addressing an order that rights a legal wrong, an illegality that was committed twice by the government. The Joint Committee on Human Rights tells us that finally the illegal government acts started under the Jobseekers Allowance, Employment Skills and Enterprise Scheme Regulations 2011 is righted by this order, almost a decade after the issue arose. On the narrow point of today's debate, I can only be guided by the committee's expertise, and I thank the committee for its comprehensive report. So I support this order. That it's taken a decade to provide full remedy for an illegality in a regulation is, I would suggest, however, something we might like to reflect on in the other work around the House, from the Agriculture Bill to the Medicines and Medical Devices Bill to the Immigration Bill next week, in all of which cases the government is seeking to provide only a skeletal framework of its intentions, promising to fill them in later with regulation. I fear there will be decades of work in cleaning up the results. The Noble Lord, the Minister, said that she expected it would take 12 months to identify and recompense the affected individuals. I can only hope that that is delivered, given what's happening with the Windrush scheme. It's not encouraging. But can I ask the Noble Lady the Minister what progress reports the House can expect over that 12 months? It would be good to have progress reports to see how this is going forward. But today's committee provides a chance to reflect on some of the broader issues, as Noble Lords already have. I wish to associate myself with the strong concerns about universal credit and sanctions expressed both by Baroness Bowles of Berkhamsted and Lord Forsyth of Drumlin, particularly the 5-week late, the impact on child poverty, mental health, and the huge damage done to lives by sanctions. But I think it's also worth taking this opportunity to reflect on the importance of human rights legislation as a balancing force for an individual against the overweeningly and potentially overwhelming power of the state. Some 5,000 individuals affected in this case on the account of the Noble Lady the Minister. Anyone might need to use human rights legislation. I doubt that either the young graduate or the HGV driver with whom this whole saga started ever expected to make personal use of human rights legislation. Yet they, in choosing to bravely stand up, had available to them this mechanism to ensure that the state was not allowed to force them into illegal temporary slavery. For that's indeed what workfare applied illegally can only be described as. Secondly, and I think in the context of COVID-19 and the potential economic situation we're facing in the coming years, it's important to reflect on the damage done by forced work being imposed on people. Let's not forget that a Department of Work and Pensions analysis in 2013 found, and I quote, "There is little evidence that workfare increases the likelihood of finding work. It can even reduce employment chances by limiting the time available for job search and by failing to provide the skills and experience valued by employers." We've seen over the past decade many such schemes, horror stories such as mandatory work activity and community work placement, various localised trailblazer schemes for young people. They've been withdrawn. There was, of course, also significant community backlash against companies participating in many of these schemes. But campaigners suggest that a more disguised, less visible form of workfare does continue. So I would ask the Noble Lady, the Minister, if she can inform the committee, either now or perhaps by letter later, how many people are now in work placements arranged by the government. I'm not going to include the word voluntary in that question, for we all know that there are very wide degrees of voluntariness. I would also ask the Noble Lady the Minister to report to us on the use of quote-unquote skills conditionality, claimants being forced to attend a skills training provider, further education, college, or other advisor with potential benefit sanctions for non-participation. These are issues that are very close to my heart because over the years I've seen so much damage done by these forced activities. In Ashton-under-Lyne now, outside a job centre that was then known particularly as being very harsh, I met a young woman who'd been sanctioned for failing to complete an unpaid work placement. She suffered from agoraphobia and would have had to take a long bus journey to the placement. She simply could not do that. She was also suffering from acute uncontrolled diabetes, and she was reliant on feeding herself from a food bank. I really dread to think where that young woman might be now. I think of a woman I met at a WASPI demonstration, representing women born in the 50s affected by the increase in the pension age for women. A woman who for decades had been an office manager and was insulted and indeed deeply disturbed by being forced to go to a one-day how to write a CV training course by this system. And of course we had companies that benefited significantly financially from these placements, and communities where large numbers of these placements meant that the income into the community from what should have been wage work was significantly reduced. As we face a potential significant rise in unemployment, it's important that we do not forget what damage was done by blaming individuals for the state of society, that we do not see any return to the disastrous and utterly false strivers versus skivers rhetoric that caused so much social division and heartache. But I think we also need to focus on how this job or activity at any cost causes broader damage. There's lots of focus on all sides of politics on our productivity problem. Now, I would question perhaps what we mean by productivity, particularly in service sectors, in caring sectors, with people-to-people contact. What is productivity? But there's also the question of people actually ending up in the right job, the optimum job for themselves and society. Forcing people quickly into a new job that's a bad fit, with sanctions, with the threat of starvation, or having to go to seek charity at a food bank, is in no one's system, in no one's interest, yet that's the entire way that our system is slanted. Which is where we come to trusting individuals to know what's best for them, giving them the space, the time, the resources to develop their human potential, to grow their experiences and find the way they can best contribute to society. Which is where it might not surprise the noble lady, the Minister, to know I'm going to briefly mention universal basic income. Of course, as a society, a community, we should be helping people to find their way in the world, providing support through advice on studies, careers guidance, practical support in making choices. But the best person to find the way forward, to identify the skills and experience they need, is the individual concerned. And giving them the space, the time, the security to do that through an unconditional payment is a way that meets their basic needs, is, I would suggest, the way forward. Compulsion to the dictates of the state or bureaucracy, rather than providing individual freedom and choice, is something perhaps that might find significant support, even on the bench